Terroir. I'm Simon Jacob, your host for this episode from Jerusalem. Before we get started, I ask that wherever you are, please take a moment and pray for the safety of our soldiers and the safe return of all of our hostages. The following is an interesting conversation regarding a wine tasting we recently had. It's not our usual format, but I hope you will enjoy it nonetheless. If you're driving in your car, please focus on the road ahead. If you're comfortably home, select a wonderful bottle of kosher wine, sit back and enjoy this playful discussion exploring both aged and new kosher wines. I'd like to welcome everybody back to our first podcast of the new year, Rosh Hashanah, after Rosh Hashanah 5785. And welcome to the Kosher Terroir. I have a guest with me who is unexpectedly here. It's my son, Ovadiah. He's actually my number 2 son, but he's my keeper of whatever wines I have left in New Jersey, which aren't that many, and also any wines that I end up getting delivered to New Jersey. So I'd like to welcome him onto the podcast. He's always been there in the background, so it's a pleasure recording a podcast with one of my children, who himself has 8 of his own children, and a fellow wine lover. So, welcome.
Thank you so much. I would say long-time listener, first-time caller, but I think I've snuck into 1 or 2 in the past. So, pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So, we're going to go over some crazy, incredible wines we had the pleasure to experience just over a week ago at my daughter's wedding, and the wines were so exceptional that it was it's worth making a podcast specifically to discuss them and to discuss some of the kosher wines we've tasted while Ovadiah has been here in Jerusalem. It was also my birthday, so that was another reason to pull out some special bottles of wine. And I think as we go through this, you'll get a feel for those bottles. Okay, so we started with some whites. The first of which was Yaakov Oriah's Sadim. It's a Semillon. It was in a 750 milliliter bottle, and it was a 2009 Semillon. This bottle is absolutely historic. I don't think, besides, within the kosher world at least, this bottle is just absolutely exceptional. Opening up in 2024, the end of 2024, a 2009 Semillon that is just so crisp and fresh and showing all the signs of incredible youth. It would have kept going. It's a pity to have opened it, except that when you've got a group of people together who are just really exceptional, and maybe we'll discuss some of the people who are there because they're really awesome wine people. But that was a truly exceptional bottle, including Yaakov Oriah, who happened to be there, by the way.
Well, one funny observation for me is that, sort of as we were looking for wines for the wedding, I came across a 2017 bottle of that wine, and I bought it for my father, and I thought it would be very nice to be able to share it in that context. And he kind of turned to me and said, gosh, this one, can sit for another 10 years. Maybe we'll take out the 2009 instead, which, again, in the context of whites, that's definitely not something that comes up in conversation that often.
Yep. But what did you think of it?
It was delicious. It tasted like it was meant to be drunk at exactly that moment, and it certainly had more time to go, but it was spectacular. If I could, 2 wines that we didn't drink at the wedding, but that we did get for the Shabbat Kala were 2 other Yaakov Oriah whites. One was Malkat Levavot, the Queen of Hearts, which again, in the context of a Shabbat Kala, perfect fit. And the second one was Ezer Kenegdo, same construct.
Right.
SoulMate, which, if you're thinking about Shabbat Kalas, felt really appropriate. I was, sadly, because it was a Shabbat Kala, unable to taste them myself. So I think we got some bottles to taste later, but we didn't get a chance to drink them with the Kala.
Okay. Yeah, but those are exceptional wines. The Ezer Kenegdo is a fairly new release of the Ezer Kenegdo, though they've been exceptional since the very first release. I really love that wine. And along with Yaakov Oriah's whites are just really fun and interesting and exciting. All of those wines worked well even without food, which is actually his wines. Some of them, the orange wines especially, need to have food to really be enjoyed to their fullest. But those were all exceptional wines, really exceptional wines. Also, not to belittle the other whites we had, the other white wine we had, which was Carmel Kayoumi Vineyard Riesling from 2017. I believe it's the most up-to-date version of the Riesling. It was also, we had two bottles, two 750 milliliter bottles that went pretty quick. None of these wines could we tell you how they aged over time because the people just really enjoyed them all within
moments.
Not moments, but within an hour, certainly. And they didn't degrade over that hour at all. The thing about the Kayoumi Riesling is that it's probably one of the most Germanic Rieslings released in Israel. It has all of the petrol undertones, and it's just lovely, fresh and crisp, and just a wonderful, oily Riesling. It was just really exceptional. It's one of the best Rieslings ever released in Israel from an Israeli winery, and it was just really appreciated and fun.
I couldn't agree more. I thought it was spectacular. The only other white that we had, and it wasn't at the wedding, but over the course of the past almost 4 weeks now that we've been here, repeatedly, was the Flam Camille.
Which is, that's again an Israeli white from Flam Winery. It's named after their mom, and who's the kind of the CEO of the winery, to be quite honest. She's the accounting, so she's the one who controls everything. But that wine is it's a Chardonnay-based wine. It's so full in your mouth. The mouth taste is so broad, and the finish is so long. It's just it's also a wonderfully great wine. It's probably one of the best Chardonnays made in Israel. Just beautiful, beautiful wine. Okay, so there are some more whites, but we'll get to them later because they were on the dessert side. But let's talk a little bit about the reds. And the kind of the highlight of the reds for the evening were a flight of Castel Grand Vin Magnums from 2003, 2008, and 2010. And I was a little scared about the 2003. Even in the Magnum form, I was a little scared of it. But none of the bottles that we drank, and it wasn't just my feeling how good they were. It was generally accepted across most of the people who tasted, or all of the people who tasted, that the 2003, though it was not a youngster anymore by any means, it was still delicious. Nothing really wrong with it at all. there are people who said it was already past peak, but it certainly wasn't unfriendly or unapproachable. It was just wonderful, wonderful. The 2003 was just spectacular. The 2008 was, well, go ahead, Ovadiah, give me a feel.
Before we jump to 2008, on that 2003, I thought it actually really had aged incredibly elegantly. And I thought, we did the vertical, but I also thought as a horizontal test, you had an incredible French, wine from a 2000 vintage. So maybe a little bit older, but, equally 20 plus years between the two of them. And it had the same, incredible, dynamic where it had that elegance in the aging. It had still phenomenal character and flavors playing through, and it was just an absolute delight to be able to taste it. You could see the smiles on the bartenders as they were pouring and maybe tasting a little bit of it. Just an incredible wine.
The French wine that I think that you're talking about is the Smith Haute Lafite, which was a 2000 as well, and not as well. It was a 2000 as opposed to 2003, but it's also an exceptional bottle, and it was just wonderful, crazy wonderful to taste it with all the other wines that we were tasting, and it was just also 100% on. Go ahead.
No, sorry if I took us out of order.
No, it's fine.
I just think that compare contrast is incredibly powerful because, you have the delicious old world French wines, which are still, phenomenal franchises in their own right. But I think that the fact that you have a 2003 Castel that is presenting as robustly, as phenomenally as it did, portends incredible things for the future of the Israeli wine industry, because there aren't that many Israeli wines that go that far back. But there are, given the volume and breadth of the wines and creativity of the wines that are being, generated now, I just think that the future is incredibly bright.
Yeah. These were Castel Grand Vins, and they're just really exceptional. That 2003 was actually the earliest vintage, kosher vintage by fully kosher vintage by Castel. They actually had a 2002 and a half. The half of the 2002s were also kosher. But the 2003, I don't even know if they released a 2002 kosher in a Magnum, but the 2003 was just crazy good. The 2008 was a Shemitah year, but it was a good year in Israel. It was actually a wonderful year in Israel for Cabernets. And the 2008 was also, it also was extremely elegant. It hadn't aged, it didn't feel like it had aged anywhere near as long as the 2003. It was fresher, but it was really also a lovely wine as far as I was concerned.
Full force, right? Always a preference for non-Shemitah wines when we can get them. But that was one that I just had to taste, and it was spectacular. And it absolutely tasted as if it was in the prime of its life. There's no question that's a sort of very powerful and phenomenal. Between the two, the 2008 and 2010, which we had, sort of shortly thereafter. I mean, they were both incredibly delicious. I don't know that I would give one the nod over the other, but the 8 was.
I think the 2010 was actually tasting young, and I think it could have gone a lot longer, but they really tasted as if they were in the proper order of their ages. The 2010 was quite a number of people's favorite wine of the evening. It was really, really good. Just again, we're using all sorts of crazy adjectives for these, but they really were really special. Another wine we had as well was the Flamme Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve 2010 in the small bottle format, the 750 regular a wine bottle format. That I have had in the past, and it has not performed anywhere near as well as this bottle did. This was just, magic. It was just great. There was absolutely nothing about that bottle that you could say anything negative about. It was just great. It was a great, at least my perspective, it was an absolutely exceptional, great bottle of wine. And that's also, I believe, that 2010 was the first kosher Flam Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve. So
this is a mark to the breadth of the family, but I think we had that wine at one of my sister's weddings.
Yeah, we did.
And it was incredible then, although maybe you didn't love it as much as I did. But it was still, it was very robust and delicious, in the context of not just your birthday, but this family celebration.
It was a wonderful celebration with quite a number of people who were tasting, and I think everybody was kind of blown away by how well the 2010 performed, because there have been some instances in the past. So thank God it seemed to have been stored well, and it was really good, really great. Okay. We also then had a Gvaot Masada 2013 Magnum that was also Masada is their one of their top wines out of Gvaot, and we actually had
we had good representation from
Gvaot there.
Yeah.
They were the
whole team, I think, showed up.
Well, the CEO was there from Gvaot, and he was anxious to see how it turned out, and it was just great. It was just a wonderful. It was just great bottle of wine as well. Exceptional. It was different. It was different than the others, but it was really, really beautiful. Beautiful bottle of wine.
For me, just
Yep.
in terms of what it brought for me was also just this year. I think this past year was the first time we had a chance to take the family to visit the winery and the visitor center at Gvaot, and it was a wonderful memory, an incredible visitor center. Definitely something that if you haven't done yet, it's worth doing. That the food that they have is delicious, and it's wonderful to go alongside with that wine. But when we were there, we were tasting the current vintages of the 2000 to the 2020s and the 2021s and 22s, and so this was really spectacular because you kind of got a chance to see something that they put forth and had really had a chance to mature. I don't know that it needed to go longer. I think it was. It was definitely within its tasting window,
and it performed admirably. It was wonderful. There's a number of wines coming out of Gvaot now that are just really special. They're doing some of the early. We got to taste some of the early shots at the new. Not new, but really old varietals that they brought back to life, that Shivi Drori has brought back to life under a program that he's been running with Ariel University, of trying to collect old varietals from Israel and reestablish them, which means that you've got to take them and you've got to clean them genetically, get rid of all of the infectious parts of them, all of the disease parts, and produce a strain that is representative of that original varietal. And he's done that with quite a number. Especially wonderful was the Bittuni, which was as Pinot Noir as anything I've ever tasted, and it's not even fully developed and growing properly yet. But it was just it's such an Israeli, fresh, bright Pinot Noir. It's just great bottle of wine, and their visitor center has wonderful pizzas and all sorts of breads and cheeses and everything else you could imagine. So if you've got a family and you want to take them someplace to do a wine tasting, you could keep the kids busy with the pizza while you're tasting some of the wonderful wines. They have a new wine.
Raz, maybe, I think?
The Raz.
Was also delicious.
But it was way too young to drink that bottle.
It needed time. That wasn't the one I was thinking of. The one I was thinking of was they made a white, and it might have been a 2021 or 2022 white. Right. It was, I want to say maybe a cab white or something like that. Or maybe had a little bit of cab in it. That was just, that sounds unconventional. It was incredibly delicious.
Right.
So we have to fact check that. But
I believe that they brought out a bottle that wasn't really released yet that ended up, I think it ends up becoming a Givaot white, maybe under the Masada label. I'm not sure, but it's a very high-end white from their perspective. And it was a blend, and it did have a cab in it, a cab component in it. I don't remember exactly. The Raz is one that they have brought out. I insisted on tasting it, and they said, you're actually sacrificing this bottle. But we did taste it, and it was very good, very unapproachable. But as it stayed open longer, it got more and more approachable and better. And I have at least one, maybe two bottles put away in the cellar that I'm hoping to taste in a while. They're reds, and they're just they're the top of their production right now. So that was great. That was a lot of fun. And then we also had a wine by Kobi Arbiv of Recanati fame. He's the winemaker for Recanati. But he also has his own wine production under the label Mia Luce. And we tasted a whole cluster Marselan 2018 Magnum that was just also... it could definitely have gone longer. It wasn't anywhere, anywhere near suffering, age when we tasted it. But it was also really accessible. And that Marselan is just, the whole cluster Marselan is just also crazy delicious. It hung in there with all the rest of the wines that we went through. So it was really, really beautiful to go through it. Any thoughts on that one?
I don't think I got a chance to taste it.
Okay.
But the Mia Luces that I had in the past were spectacular. So
yeah, I still have some more. I still have some more of the 2018 whole cluster Marselan. And it's in a Magnum format. Okay. So we did talk about the Smith Haute Lafitte as a French representative that was at the table for people to taste. But we also, and that was a 2000, which, to be quite honest, I really was saving that bottle to drink with Ralph Medeb, Dr. Medeb, but I couldn't help myself. So, Dr. Ralph, please forgive me, and we'll taste more in the future with God's help. Domaine, we had a Domaine Roses Camille, which is a Pomerol from France, the 2011, and also a standard bottle format. That was also a wine that I've tasted the 5, which took forever to become approachable. The 6, which appeared to be more approachable earlier, but then went to sleep and became totally unapproachable for a long, long time. But when I tasted the 6, I think the last time I tasted it was with, speaking of Dr. Medeb, and it was wonderful. It was just wonderful. It was accessible and delicious and wonderful. The 2011 I was really scared of because I never thought it would be approachable, but it actually was wonderful and well. It was young. It was definitely young, but it was within the drinking window, and it was really nice, really lovely, wonderful, wonderful wine, just wonderful.
Yeah, all of the pain had burnt off, and so it was probably early in the drinking window, but very, very drinkable, delicious. I seem to recall that's one of your favorite French wines. No, DRC.
It is, yeah. Well, people,
the SHL is also
within the kosher world, they call it DRC, even though it's not really the DRC that everybody talks about in the non-kosher world. But it's fine. I don't think we're going to get to the non-kosher DRC anytime soon as a kosher version, so it's okay. But it was lovely. It was wonderful. The 2011 was just great. We've also tasted some crazy kosher wines that are from kind of boutique winemakers. We didn't taste them at the wedding, but we've tasted them since Ovadiah's been here. And I really want to mention them because they are really exceptional. If you can get a chance to taste any of them, they're worth it. They're well worth it. First of all, was a special kosher run by Zev Dunya, who works at Seahorse and doesn't usually produce kosher wines. But one year in 2019, he went back to Agur, which is where he was originally partnered, and created a special run of Seahorse called K-Syrah. I guess kosher Syrah. It was 2019. And if you ever get a chance to taste one of those bottles, absolutely, it was made by Eyal, who was the Eyal Drori, who was the winemaker at Seahorse. Now he's the winemaker back at Agur, making kosher wine. But that wine is a Syrah that is just, wow, just wonderful. If you get a chance to talk to Evyatar Cohen at Koshel Baracha, I think he might still have a few bottles left of that, but not many. And that should be, that's a really, really wonderful wine to taste if you get a chance to.
I was reading through a book that you had of old wineries in Israel. I think the book was maybe from the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And that was one of the wineries it mentioned. And I was like, okay, but if it's not kosher, I'm never going to get a chance to taste it.
Yeah.
It was delightful, and it was nice to be able to have, access to that in a kosher format that you could really enjoy. And I think we've had, we've had 19. Have we had anything earlier than 19, or 19 is the only one we've had?
19 is the only one because it's the only one ever produced.
Fine.
that was kosher.
Just delicious.
The only one ever produced that was kosher.
Yeah. But on the subject, right? Yeah. We the rest of that menu of Agur wines that we've tasted together. And that was another winery I had a chance to visit with you. I think it was over the summer. Just incredible stuff.
Eyal is absolutely a creative genius. You can tell by walking into a barrel room and seeing barrels literally covered with chalk of, chalk marks of this is this, and this is this blend, and this is this is why we're keeping this aside, and this is what we're blending. It's a small boutique winery that is just making exceptional wines. Magical
wines, yeah.
Yeah, just delicious.
Aptly named with that Kesem.
Yeah. Kesem is the highest end wine that they make at the moment, though I'm sure that's going to be surpassed shortly, because I know they're working on some crazy combinations of wines. Go ahead.
The other winery I just wanted to mention, and again, we didn't have it at the wedding, but we have tasted bottles from them since. I'll just say that my favorite bottle of Israeli wine I think I've ever tasted was the 2020 Hasela Cab.
Yeah, they only make a cab.
Right. And, well, in 2020 maybe, they have a rosé since then.
Oh, right.
But that 2020 Cab was just so delicious. And again, very, very, very young for what it was, but so, so delicious. And I figured, one hit wonder. It was an incredible wine, but, these guys are early on in the game. And if this is the first wine they made, maybe they'll have another one that, comes up to it at some point in the future, but likely not soon. And with all the war that's happening around us, I was fairly convicted in that judgment. And then we had a chance over the course of the summer to taste the 2022 that we retasted this past Shabbat.
Which we bought.
Yeah.
But it didn't taste anywhere near as delicious as the 2020. But we bought it because it's a brand new, tiny little winery out by Arugot Farm, and it's run by two exceptional people and their wives. And actually,
the wives and their exceptional husbands these days. Yeah,
the wives are the exceptional ones, and their husbands who are battling on the front. But the wives actually made this wine, the 2022. It tasted okay to begin with. It was very young, hard to get over that. But as we've let it sit, it has just become more and more and more delicious. So the 2020 is definitely the best of their wines, and I don't know if you can get any more of that. But you can only get it at the winery. It's a tiny, tiny little winery that's just working very hard to produce exceptional stuff, and they're just wonderful. Yeah, we've gone through a whole bunch of really lovely whites. We enjoyed last night a Jordan Chardonnay, actually. That was really great. We also tasted a Chenin Blanc from Nana Winery in the desert. It was a wonderful, really crisp, very very fresh and very citrusy Chenin. It was just really great. And then we also had a wonderful white by Itai Lahat as well. That was also just wonderful.
Surprisingly delicious. Yeah.
Yeah. And these are fairly new wines, but they're whites, and they're really, really good. Okay. Well, to mention the last two whites that we actually had at the wedding by the way, the wedding was at Pesagot, and we had a whole bunch of their wines as well, which were lovely. And it started out with their bubbly, and that was really great from the very beginning of the wedding. And their wines by Sam Soroka were just great. So that was also wonderful. And I highly recommend Psagot as a place to visit. And also, if you ever want to do a wedding or an event, what an exceptionally beautiful place to do it. It was just off the deep end, beautiful. The temperature was perfect. It was just outside, and it was just great. Now it's covered by a tent, but it was just really great. The last two bottles, the last bottle, we had two bottles so people could share and taste it, were two bottles of Yaakov Oriah's Old Musketeer, which is a Chardonnay. It's 2008 as well, but it was aged. This was the variety that was aged in barrels for 8 years. And this dessert wine, I'm sure there's no way to get any more of this, but this dessert wine can only be described as waffles with maple syrup. And that's hard to believe that you could have a Chardonnay aged in such a way that it tastes like waffles and maple syrup and is so exceptionally delicious. But it is, and it's just wonderful. And even non-wine drinkers who I went up to and said, you got to taste this, at least taste it. Just their eyes lit up and they said, where in the world did you find anything like that? So Yaakov Oriah is also an incredible winemaker. And he was just, he's just great, super great. And those bottles of Old Musketeer are just awesome, absolutely awesome. They can't oxidize anymore. They're oxidized, but they can evaporate. So you want to cork them. You don't want to leave them out because you don't want them to evaporate. But that was really quite a lot of fun.
Yeah. Should we mention any of the other things that we tasted over the course of the past couple of days, just because?
Yeah, sure. Whatever else.
We had a delicious beer.
Oh.
That was an Ella Valley.
Valley Belgium triple. Wow. Man, I've been missing New Belgium Brewery in Colorado. And I think they've got one on the East Coast now, but in Colorado for a long time. I don't miss them anymore. That Ella Valley Belgium triple was just over the top.
Israel has definitely arrived on the beer scene. There's no question.
Well, I knew that from before, from some of the previous podcasts. But that specific podcast, that specific beer, hit all my sweet spots, all the parts that I look for in a beer.
And then, and I guess we probably should mention the Scotch, just because in celebration of your birthday,
right? We had a few Scotches.
We have two 35-year-old Springbanks that we tasted.
Yes, yeah. Okay, those were the 35-year-old ones.
And then,
we also had
the Strathisla, I think was
Strathisla. Yeah,
was the 1954.
It was a 1954 bottle that was bottled in 1996. And that was over the top as well. I mean, I'm passionate about scotches as well as wine, but those are bottles that I picked up many years ago, thinking, okay, they're from it's for my birthday. These are exceptional bottles. Maybe in the future I'll open them on a birthday. And it was the time.
I mean, my takeaway from this, so far from this trip that doesn't ever seem to end, is
if LL gets you on a flight, eventually,
is that from a wine standpoint, Israel's definitely there, producing incredible wines that can contend with anywhere else in the world. And that we actually had evidence of that at the wedding with some of the best winemakers, and it was just incredible to see and taste and be part of that. I think with the experiences around the beer that we tasted over the course of this past few weeks there as well. And my hope is that, sort of to celebrate your 83rd birthday, we get to try and see whether the Israeli whiskey, sort of scene has caught up to the rest of the world in that respect, or maybe we'll have to wait till a later birthday to enjoy that. But I'm happy to keep waiting. That's fine.
What's also exceptional is the whole kosher restaurant scene here in Israel has just gone crazy. And I never in my wildest dreams thought I would ever thank the French for something. But to be quite honest, they have raised the level of cheese and food and even wine in Israel. And it's just great. It's just absolutely a pleasure. So, over the top. So, we've been enjoying what all of B'nai Israel coming back to Israel provides, and it's just great. So, I know this is not a normal or ordinary podcast for me, but I just, because it's the first one after the new year, it's actually the third year of podcasts, though we're just a little over a year old, but it's gone over a couple of Rosh Hashanahs. So I just want to wish you all Shana Tova Umtuka. Please God, we need, at least at this point in time, to have in mind our soldiers and also all of our hostages. Please, if you've got an opportunity, to pray to Hashem, to God, to release the hostages, and also to allow the soldiers to come home to their families, in health and well, and end this war as quickly as is possible, because it's a very difficult war, especially on Israel.
I would just add to that, there are still many people who aren't able to go home.
Right.
And, in addition to releasing the hostages or restoring the hostages from captivity, which is a constant prayer on our part, I also pray that those Jews who aren't yet returned home should be able to return home in safety and comfort speedily.
Please God. Please God. Okay. Thank you. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Be well. This is Simon Jacob again, your host of today's episode of the Kosher Terroir. I have a personal request. No matter where you are or where you live, please take a moment to pray for our soldiers' safety and the safe and rapid return of our hostages. Please subscribe via your podcast provider to be informed of our new episodes as they are released. If you're new to the Kosher Terroir, please check out our many past episodes.